Welcome to Bat Therapy, mental health through the lens of comics and film. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We're your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. Okay, so last week we talked about the Super Bat 4-part comic book series where Batman gets Superman's powers. They essentially switch powers, but that means Superman doesn't have powers. So Batman gets Superman's powers and then just, whoa.
He's awesome.
He gets very intense, and that's saying something when you say that Batman gets very intense.
You can always say it in a good way, right? Like, he got overly absorbed with work.
So I like that that's how you worded it, because so Keaton and I afterward, I was like, I don't really know what to hone in on for something psychology with this one, because we like to, talk about the source material, then maybe delve into something more psychology related to it. And as we were chatting, I was like, ooh, let's talk about, does Batman have Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, or OCPD?
I already have a question for you. I think you know what it's going to be.
Yeah, but ask
so,
away.
OCD versus OCPD.
Yeah, great idea, right? Not confusing at all.
Those are different. They're different.
They're different. Yeah. Yay.
Okay, so
confusing for people.
OCD is Obsessive Compulsive Disorder.
Correct.
OCPD is Obsessive Compulsive Personality.
Yes.
Disorder.
So when we're talking about personality disorders, which I don't love that term because I feel like it can be very stigmatizing for people, when really what it means is, so there are continuums of experience for pretty much everything. And that includes, like, for example, most people know what anxiety feels like. In fact, it can be very adaptive. There's a continuum in terms of like how intense and how often and how frequent people might experience those anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're on the low end, there's actually probably some problems that you have. And if you're on the high end, there are probably some issues that you have.
Okay.
So when it just comes to most things, there's like a bell curve where most people fall in the middle, but inevitably there are going to be people that fall at the extremes, the low end and the high end. So when it comes to personality disorders, it's essentially saying, hey, here are traits of a person's personality that we've noticed these patterns where there are groups of people who have these kind of combinations of personality traits that can become really rigid early on in life. So you need to see these things by like early adulthood, sometimes even before then.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it across different scenarios. It's not like, oh, it's just happening at work or it's just happening in my relationship, but it's happening across a bunch of different scenarios. And it's stuck and it's causing that person a lot of issues or a lot of distress, either to them or to the people around them, because of just the intensity and the inflexibility of whatever those traits are. So when it comes to personality disorder, so with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, we're talking about essentially what you just said. So someone who is so focused on work, on organization, on order, on rules, on things being perfect, to the point that it actually gets in the way of them accomplishing what they're trying to do. So think of someone who is so focused on getting something right that they never turn in a finished product because it's never good enough. Or someone who needs things to be done. They're very rigid in terms of how things can be done. They're not flexible based on the situation. So no matter what, here are the rules and we're sticking to them. It actually works against what the rules are for, because not everything's so black and white. So we tend to have very black and white, very structured, to the point where it makes it hard to actually get the things done they're trying to do.
So is it one of those things where they have trouble executing, or is it one of those things where they have trouble with just keeping on tinkering? Like, is it like, because the way I think about it is someone can't make a decision because they're stuck in this mode of overthinking it, versus someone that's like, I can't turn in this report. I need to add this to it, and I need to add this to it, and I need to add this to it. But
It's
there's
more that.
something missing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's, in my opinion, I mean, expert opinion, take it for, whatever that's worth.
I read comic books.
The Batman we see with souped up powers, I think, is a really great example. So there are certain storylines where Batman, we love Batman because he's surly, and so another thing you often see with these folks is they're very focused on tasks and getting things done. They're much more comfortable with, if I'm with other people or doing something, there's a
Goal
task at
oriented.
hand. It's very goal oriented. Ideally, some sort of like thing where you can win or compete or come out on top kind of thing. Otherwise, you tend to not be comfortable with the more like touchy-feely kind of stuff and the flexible people. So there are a lot of things that, if you think about it, a lot of these things really seem to tie in with Batman. He's not too comfortable with people unless he's using them as either pawns in his plan, or okay, you're my sidekick because I need to have one. He's very meticulous. He's very order and oriented. He's very much focused on getting things perfect. He's tends to be pretty inflexible about things, to the point where it can cause problems for the people around him. However, usually, I think we would all argue that most of the time, he's successful, meaning he's able to accomplish what he's setting out to do as Batman. He has some relationships that do maintain. I mean, once again, on the continuum, he edges toward obsessive compulsive personality disorder. He's pretty close to that line, but a lot of times he's still able to maintain relationships and things. And yeah, there are struggles, but he can come around. This, I think, is an example of a storyline where, because of he gets Superman's powers and he gets really honed in on, I have to save everyone. I think this shows that subtle difference and shift. Okay, here's the personality disorder piece. So at first he was pretty effective, but he gets to a point where he loses focus of the fact that he needs to be powered by the sun. He's beating up his, like, I don't know if Dick is his adopted son in this storyline, but essentially, like, someone who so he's beating up his adopted son. He's throwing a wrench in his relationship with Alfred. Alfred was like, I don't know if I can forgive him for this. Everyone's struggling to be able to be there for him, and he's literally, the very goal he has is falling through his fingertips because he's so obsessed and focused with it. So I think this kind of shows, okay, what's the difference between someone who has really strong traits of something versus when does it hit personality disorder kind of area, which, once again, we're talking about a weird change here. Personality disorders are something that we see as like traits. So you have them like growing up and you see them in early adulthood, which doesn't fit here. But given the magical circumstances, using it as just an example of what, because especially in our society, we're all about productivity and getting things right and, all these things. So kind of that question mark of like, well, what makes it a personality disorder? I think the storyline helps you see that kind of fine-tuned difference.
Okay. It's definitely one of those things. So this is the first time I've ever heard of PD.
People don't tend to hear about this one too much. Yeah.
Well, and I also feel like OCD is one of those things that is very much overused and abused term. Like, someone says, you just hear it, and it's got to be so offensive to people that actually have to deal with this disorder when someone is, my clothes always have to match. I'm OCD. And it's like, that's not
Right.
what
So
that
yeah,
is.
absolutely. OCD. It's funny because OCPD, people usually have never heard of it. OCD, everyone's heard of, and at this point, I feel like everyone feels like it's overused in some way. So yeah, so obsessive compulsive disorder is there are thoughts or images or urges of some sort that happen repetitively for a person that just seem to bombard their minds, and it's taking up a lot of time and energy to try and maneuver it. And usually the
Mm-hmm.
person's trying to ignore or push away. These are the obsessions that I'm referring to, trying to push those away. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, one of the ways that they're trying to deal with those is through compulsions, which
Mm-hmm.
is having some sort of behavior, repetitive behavior you're doing to try and keep those at bay. Which could be like, oh, I have to do things, I have to follow certain rules or do certain things. So there can absolutely, there can be a rigidity to it that feels similar. But honestly, there's a decent amount of times where someone will be like, oh, I'm so OCD. And what they're describing feels a little more like OCPD, where they're talking about more perfectionistic kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
where they're talking about some of the inflexibility that's more of like a trait rather than this like, oh, I have some sort of thought or urge or image and I'm trying to manage it in some way with those compulsions.
OCD is an OC, and it sounds like OCPD, I guess now. It's so interesting because as I think about it, I realize how much it can potentially give rise to other mental health disorders, right? Because someone with OCPD, I mean, it's very easily could suffer from anxiety, depression. I feel like they could possibly have fits of mania in
So
there as
so
well.
there are it's actually commonly comorbid with bipolar disorder, eating disorders, OCD as well.
You say comorbid?
Oh, so happens concurrently with. So
Okay.
you might have multiple disorders at one time.
Okay.
Admittedly, so it's tricky because look, there's a ton of things we don't know about mental health. And so when it comes to these disorders, we've seen patterns and we group those patterns and we research those patterns and we research them closely. But at the end of the day, part of what makes it mental health is we have not been able to explain some of the underlying physiological and whatever going on
Hmm.
in the body. And so like for diabetes, you're looking at the blood and you're, looking, okay, is insulin needed here and da 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 da. We can't really do that with mental health. We don't know what levels of this, that, or the other may be helpful. We're still trying to figure out a ton of things. And so some of these patterns where you see people having like multiple diagnoses at once, I don't love it because part of it is probably highlighting just the imperfections of what we don't know. Because I absolutely despise when someone has like 4 or 5 diagnoses listed down. It's
Hmm.
possible, just like people might have like hypertension and diabetes, like I was mentioning, and other things. Like sometimes having one increases your risk for another, and they're linked together. It doesn't feel very great though when you look at your list and it's like, look at how
Right.
many things I'm dealing with. So there's overlap with some of these. And yeah, you definitely have certain other kinds of conditions that you might be more prone to. Also, hoarding disorder is a really common one to overlap with this. There
Okay.
can be a tendency to struggle to let go of things because it might be needed for something. So I think a lot of times we think of like OCPD or OCD related, things that have some sort of like obsessive component, we think of cleanliness. That's not
Hmm.
necessarily the case because sometimes there can be a difficulty with these things of letting something go. So OCPD can overlap with hoarding disorder and some other things too. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it definitely, and it's chicken or the egg, or maybe they're
Yeah.
both eggs and we don't understand the chicken yet.
That's yeah.
But
I'm thinking the same thing. The when you're as you're describing it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. There, if you have one, there's a higher likelihood that you have another. in terms of some of these disorders.
So, question then, because it sounds like this is something where it sounds like it's treated by treating the symptoms. And because I feel like there's not an medication they give people that'll say, hey, this will make you stop being obsessed with something versus, hey, this will make you maybe more relaxed or take the anxiety away. Or because the way you said, what's the word, comorbid?
Mm-hmm.
It just throws me up because I hear like morbid. It sounds like, yeah. And so it's an interest. Yeah, I'm learning. But
Yeah, terminology doesn't always help itself.
yeah, yeah. Because I heard comorbid, I'm like, also dead. Is that what that means? Like, yeah, because it's with OCPD, from what you're describing, there's a lot of stuff that's also associated with it and possibly diagnosed with it. Is OCPD one of those things where if someone was going from from a medicinal standpoint
Mm-hmm.
or psychiatric, I guess, is it they treat the symptoms because there isn't really anything to specifically
Great
treat
question.
that?
So, once again, keeping in mind OCPD and OCD are different things. So,
Okay.
OCD, so in general, personality disorders, because it's more like traits, these are things that have developed based on a lot of different factors. It's seen as more integrated as who a person is. Now, we're trying to create clean and clear black and white here when things are always gray when it comes to people, but generally speaking, when it comes to personality disorders, it's a lot harder to find medications that can be effective. It can be, like you said, sometimes there might be components that are more easily treated. Or, if you are struggling with these personality disorders, there's probably some distress or other issues you're having, which then can key off and be related to some other mental health diagnoses. And if you treat those, it's going to relieve the pressure on the personality disorder. And so, that can help you indirectly. But
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, there's at this point not really a medication option that there's clear evidence that can be useful for OCPD. OCD, yes, there are medications that can help. OCPD, once again, there are these differences. These are not the same. Some people have both. So if you treat the OCD, it relieves some pressure, so other things can improve. But if you only had OCPD, medications probably isn't your best route. So a lot of times what we're talking about is therapy. A lot of times with personality disorder type stuff, once again, we're talking about personality traits. This is how you are as a person. It takes a lot to be able to work through some of those things. And so part of it is trying to help someone get a sense of where this rigidity is coming from, where this sense of perfectionism is coming from, really trying to help someone be able to work through those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times you might have things like psychodynamic therapy, which really is focused on what are a person's like patterns in life and how they interact with other people, and really focusing in on building insight into who you are as a person, helping you adapt that. Or cognitive behavioral therapy, which is all
Mm-hmm.
about helping you adjust how you think and behave to help affect how you feel. So a lot of that goes into, hey, let's look at how you look at and think about the world and try and help you build more flexibility into that. So there are therapies that can be helpful. It's just one of those things that can be really tricky for personality disorders. It does tend to take a longer period of time to be able to work through some of the things that might be going on there, versus if, say, you were in an episode of depression where before the depression you had a more positive outlook on life. It's easier to get back to that, versus if it's more like trait based, then you might be like, I've always been this way. And so imagine you've always done things a certain way. It can take a really long time. Like even something as simple like I've always put my pants on in a like right foot then left foot. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, let's do the left. From now on, let's do the left. It
God,
takes right?
I
It
just
takes a little bit of time
never
to
thought
adjust.
about that.
Yeah.
It's for me. It's left leg every time. I can't imagine. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I probably threw you off your train of thought, but that just
No,
really kind of.
it jazzes me when someone connects to one of my analogies. No, I love this. Yeah, so it we might think of something as easy as putting on your pants. And you're used to left leg, then right leg. And then all of a sudden we're like, "Ooh, all these issues you've been having, it might help to be able to do right leg then left leg." And it sounds really easy, but I bet it would take you a while to get used to it. Even though it's quote as simple as just which leg do you put into your pants first? But you're just so used to it. And so that's why things that are more trait, things that have been around longer, it makes sense that those are harder to maneuver through and can take more time.
Huh. That's an interesting one. Now, next question for you, and this will swing us back towards Batman.
Mm.
With this comic, I would like for you to tell me if your expert opinion here. With this comic, I feel like what it did was amplify what what I've now learned was OCPD. I feel like all it did was amplify it, and this is something that Batman suffers from without the powers.
So I would say, once again, it depends on the storyline. When under certain kinds of stress, Batman's traits that are very much leaning toward OCPD dip into that territory.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue that he doesn't have OCPD, but there's actually times too where people will talk about a person not having, say, narcissistic personality disorder, but during like depressive episodes, it can look like it. Or if someone's like dealing with some trauma, it might look like borderline personality disorder. Or there are these times where a person might have certain traits or tendencies. And if you're leaning higher on that continuum, on those, like the spectrum from low to high, if you lean higher and then you add stress, you add tension, you add certain trigger points, boop, all of a sudden you end up in that higher level that's more like that personality disorder. But once things tame again, once they calm down again, you get back to your baseline. So an example that I think of with this is Bruce Wayne is a murderer storyline. Do you know that one? There's like a storyline where someone he's dating is found dead, I think in his house, murdered in his house, and he's like accused. Bruce Wayne is accused of the murder.
Okay.
And I love this storyline because
We need to do this one. I'm already. Yeah, I've never read this one. This sounds good.
it's
I'm
great. I
interested.
love it. And so it's this someone he's dating, murdered in his house. Bruce Wayne's accused of the murder. And what I love about it is it's another storyline like this one where you add certain changes and stressors, and all of a sudden he starts breaking down. And it's very OCPD like in certain
Mm-hmm.
ways where he stops relying on people. He's very rigid about things. It's his way or the highway. And it actually gets in his own way. And so that's the piece with this where it's pervasive and it's causing either just what we call dysfunction. So a person isn't able to effectively maneuver life. Could be
Mm-hmm.
things like their occupation, their relationships, their day-to-day like passions, or it's causing a lot of distress to them or the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Bruce Wayne, he's usually actually quite effective. Now, I'd say effective at his job. He manages okay with his relationships. Right? I mean, let's be honest. But in general, he's not particularly distressed by it, and he's able to either excel or manage things okay enough, depending on which area we're talking about. But it's when he has these stress points of certain kinds, he starts breaking down. And you'll see him like these traits uptick for him. He'll
Mm-hmm.
become more obsessive. He'll become more rigid. He will use people more like pawns and tools than as human beings, and otherwise completely ignore them and try and stay away from them. He will be so focused on the rules and what needs to happen, and he gets so caught up in it that like sometimes he'll like technically make progress, but he's actually getting in his own way, or he's making it so much harder for himself because of
Hmm.
those upticks. So I don't think he has OCPD. To get back to your question, I don't think he has OCPD. However, I think on the continuum, get real close to having
Okay.
OCPD so that when certain things happen, it's pretty easy for him to tick over the edge in terms of all of a sudden his functioning goes down and it looks like
Yeah.
there's some
Because
issues going on here.
I was gonna say I feel like certain villains definitely take him there. Anytime
Yeah.
the Riddler has him really winded up trying to figure things out, I feel like some of that came with a Hush
With Hush,
or
with Death of the Family.
Death of the Family, Batman Eternal, when he's trying to figure out who's behind all of it and he looks
Yes.
right past Cluemaster because
Yes.
he's like, no, it has to be someone.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be one of the big bads, and I'm not even looking at this one. And so I really think that, yeah, it definitely comes out. And that's interesting because I feel like all of us out there, and this is one of those things, I feel like everybody can relate to it a little bit as far as that sense of not being able to let something go or having a really hard time walking away from something when
Mm-hmm.
it's very much time to, like, no, I can figure this out. I can get this. I can do it. We could do, like, I can. And it's like, no, go home.
Right.
This is starting to hit that point where it's outside of your circle of control,
Yep. And
and you
also,
got to walk back.
you're getting diminishing returns.
Yes.
And so that is one of the key points when it comes to OCPD, because once again, there are plenty of people who are pretty perfectionistic. They want to get things right. I might fit that category. I've tried to work on some of that for myself. I'm pretty rigid with rules. I'm not Batman, but I'm probably on the upper end of this particular continuum in some ways on this spectrum. And that's one of the key points though, is a person able to like recognize and shift so that they don't have these diminishing returns where you're working on something to the point where you spend hours on something that could have taken 10 minutes, or you, like I was mentioning before earlier, you don't turn something in because it's not perfect,
Hmm.
or never seeing anything as good enough, and just the hamster wheel that keeps you on in like just just desperate fatigue because you just keep going for that goal of perfection. So yeah, that piece is really important, is the how rigid, how focused, and is it to the point where it's actually getting in the way? Because yeah, having focus can be great, having a sense of rules is great. There's nothing that's the thing, is that with these personality disorders, it's not meant to say people with traits like those are bad, you don't want any of these. It's more that most anything, if we take it into an extreme, and especially if it gets inflexible, it causes you problems. Just like a lot of times, if you have a lack of something, that can cause you problems too. So it really is that. Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.